Okay. Hey, well, good afternoon on this Wednesday. Go ahead on and tag and share. Let's get everybody in. Let's get everybody in on this wonderful Wednesday. In the studio with me, attorney. That's right, Jared Willis. How you feeling, man?
Good. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing absolutely amazing. Listen, we're excited about today's show. And I'm always excited about being able to have you, Attorney Mataki Act by Christy Henry, the conscious chick, and Kurt Bender. We do this at the beginning of every month. And man, I'm excited about you guys getting ready to launch your own shows. I know you've been extremely busy.
Yeah. It's slowing down.
It's slowing down?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
It's a good problem to have.
It is a great problem to have. Hey, I want to say good afternoon to Lorena James, Shirley Pittman, Latasha Ford. Go ahead on the tag share. Listen, we're gonna get a great conversation going today. So much to talk about that's going on in and around the city, and we're gonna talk about it right here over the Greg James Community Show. We're gonna be talking about it. Yes, man. So we are excited about it. Want to say good afternoon and once again, welcome to, that's right, the Greg James Community Show right here on 95.3 FM. Hallelujah. Hey, listen, it's raining on the outside, but guess what? The blessings of the Lord addeth and maketh no sorrow. I want to say good afternoon to all of you who are tuned in to the show and want to say that we're excited about basically what's going on in and around our city, what's going on certainly with the what's going on in our community. I mean, certainly it's a great day to just be alive. Listen, I pray that all of you had a wonderful, wonderful Easter Resurrection Sunday morning, man. We had an amazing time for sunrise, and big shouts out to all of the pastors, all of the churches that engaged in doing something special for our children. I certainly want to say that we must embrace our young people. Well, listen, I'm excited about today's show, and certainly I've got guests that's going to be calling in. Attorney Kurt Bender. That's right. He has his own show, and certainly he's going to be calling in. And Attorney Mataki Akbar, he's leaving court, but he's on his way. Either he's going to call or he's going to be present. And the conscious chick, she's going to be calling in as well. You know how the little ones are. She had to go pick up her daughter from school, but in the studio with me. And I'm excited to have him, Attorney Jared Willis, lobbyist, community engager. Let's do it all. I mean, so man, listen, let's talk a little bit about how things been going with you. I mean, I know you've been extremely busy fighting, advocating. Bring us a little bit about what's going on in City Hall.
I mean, I think the big thing coming up in City Hall is this charter review committee just wrapped up. And so I think next week they're going to be talking about some of the recommendations from the committee, and the city commission is going to vote, and there's going to be some things that go on the ballot.
Wow. I mean, by the way, talking about ballot, I mean, Supreme Court just ruled. Yeah. And hey, man, what do you say? Recreation marijuana on the ballot, abortions. I mean,
it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think these are things that poll very, very well. They're things that I think have been kind of a long time coming, and so it'll be interesting to see. I think what I'm really looking at is the way that that's going to activate voters that ordinarily don't show up as often. I think you're going to have some younger voters that maybe get activated by that too, which is a good thing. And so it'll be interesting to see what that does across the different races and how that affects turnout overall.
I mean, and you know, believe it or not, it's sad that issues like this have to get to the ballot to even motivate voters to get out and vote. But when we talk about recreational marijuana, when we talking about abortion rights, we're talking about bringing out voters who perhaps have never voted because there's an interest there.
Yeah, but I think I think you could look at it that way. But I think the flip side of that is that's the beauty of having the citizens initiative process and the ability for you can have a grassroots movement that says, okay, for whatever reason, the legislature doesn't want to do this, Congress doesn't want to do this, but we as the people want this, and so you go out, you get the signatures. I mean, it's a high burden, and there's a lot of money that gets poured into it. But again, the beauty of the citizens initiative is that if it's something that the people care about and they want to see, it's still something that can get done.
I mean, I totally agree with you, because when we talk about Amendment 4, we're talking about a citizen initiative driven amendment. We're talking about grassroots. We're talking about formerly incarcerated men and women who were constantly throughout the state of Florida out knocking doors, outstanding in Publix, Walmarts, you name it, they were there to, first of all, get the number of signatures that would even give the opportunity for a hearing to take place.
Right.
And then the next round of signatures was almost 1 million needed to get it on the ballot. So causes like this have a way and a tendency to really motivate people.
Yeah.
And I think these are two impactful initiatives that are before the people of the state of Florida.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, so what happens, just hypothetically, what happens when and if the recreational marijuana bill passes? What happens to all of the men and women who have now been serving time for extensive years with marijuana sentences?
Yeah, that's a good question. When Mitaki gets here or calls in, I think he probably has an interesting perspective on that, just on the criminal defense side. I'm inclined to think that a lot of those folks, I mean, unless there's some retroactive component of how the legislature, because what'll end up happening, I'll back up. What'll end up happening is if and when this passes in November, then the legislature will then be tasked with implementing it. So what'll happen is, let's say we get past the 60% mark, the voters say this is something that we want, that'll go on the Constitution. But then what will end up needing to happen is the legislature will then have to put in statute what that looks like in implementation. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do that. I think in a lot of ways, the regulatory structure, I think the common consensus is that it'll probably look somewhat like medical marijuana, for better or worse. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's any criminal justice components to that. But I think that's an important piece of what people, if they're looking at recreational marijuana and they're saying we want this, but they also want it to have some component of criminal justice reform. There needs to be, the people need to make that known, because I don't know that the ballot initiative in and of itself really will have any impact on it.
And you got to take that into consideration, because there are and I don't know what state it was, but there was a state, I want to say Texas maybe, but I don't want to be wrong. But there was a state that released so many felons who were incarcerated for marijuana charges after they made it legal in their state. So it's a very interesting conversation to have. There's so much in store, even with abortion rights. So listen, it's a time that the citizens, the people of the state of Florida, they got to get out, they got to vote, they got to register, they got to do what's necessary, because this year's election, man, is it could be the turn of what the world will see based on who is elected in 2024. There's a lot weighing on this.
Yeah, and I think people are looking at the federal elections, they're looking at the presidential election, they may be paying attention to their congressional elections. And I think what gets lost is when you look down the ballot to your state or local elections, a lot of times those are going to be the things that you see the most impact from in your everyday life. And so I do think some of the things that we're going to be seeing at the state and local level are going to be going to be very, very impactful. So,
and I think our state and our local races are highly important. And this year, I mean, every year when there's an election time, um, there's always buzz about who's going to run for different seats, and there's always great conversation around it. I remember when District 8 was open. I mean, it wasn't never thought of mine to run, but however, somehow, some way, sitting down with some people who really thought that, hey man, you're out here, you're doing the work, why not? And before I knew it, I mean, it was the talk of a whole state, you know, former incarcerated young man running against the establishment.
yeah.
Grassroots guy running against someone who's been mentored to take on this next seat. So elections carry great conversation, and as we look at it now, there are some interesting races that are really stirring up for 2024, and we're talking about the race for city commission.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stirring up local pastor who is in the vying for that, Pastor Rudy Ferguson against incumbent Jack Porter, and there's a lot of weight in that conversation.
There is, yeah. I mean, I think that race, and then the race, Curtis Richardson's race against Mayor Donovan Johnson. You know, I think that's going to end up being, those two races are going to be, they're going to be very contentious. And you know, if you look at the current makeup of our city commission, you know, I don't think it's any secret. You see it in the news all the time. It's you know, it tends to be somewhat of a 3-2 split. The lines, I think, are very defined, and you know, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's potential, you know, to that dynamic changes after this election cycle. So we'll have to see kind of what that holds.
And you know, the thing about it is, when you look at our city makeup, and when you look at what we see now, like you said, it's normally 3-2, and it really shouldn't be that way. I mean, because when I've been observing, and when you look to see that there's always Commissioner Matlow and Commissioner Porter, who are always going to be in total agreement, good, bad, or indifferent. But I really feel and believe that at some point we've got to keep the people in mind that we're representing, and not allow our personal agendas to fly over the dais as though we're in a war with each other.
Yeah. And
the people are suffering in the midst of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think when you look at those two in particular, and I'm going to try not to be too negative. I think you can look at my Twitter if you want that, but you know, I think that when you look at them, though, they have a constituency that elected them. They were elected. The majority of Tallahassee, you know, a few different blocks said these are who we want, and so I think that they had messaging that really resonated with folks. I mean, look, I voted for Commissioner Matlow the first time he ran. I thought, you know, he had some really cool ideas, you know, but I think the problem is when you immediately come in and you start poking people in the eye, you know, I think the question I would ask is, well, how have their constituencies been served by that? And, you know, I think some of the responses, well, you know, the majority of the establishment has prevented us from doing this. But, you know, I would argue back, you know, I don't think anybody on that side really gave the establishment a chance. I mean, politics at the end of the day and governance at the end of the day is about finding a consensus, because Tallahassee is an extremely diverse community. And again, you know, the people I think it's pretty clear the people that elected Jeremy Matlow to commission are probably very, very different from the folks that elected Curtis Richardson. And so we all have to live in the community together. And the idea that you would look at a whole chunk of the community and alienate them and say, well, you know, the chamber, the developers, the business people, you know, that's the villain. And I'm generalizing. Right. In some ways, this is a little bit of a straw man argument, but you know, that you would alienate some portion that's not your constituency. That's really hard to govern that way, because now you have to reckon with folks that were elected by those folks. And it's really hard to find a consensus when you create this kind of us versus them dynamic.
And in your opinion, and We'll probably take some callers, 850-671-1450. In your opinion, because this is what we share. We share our opinion, we share our thoughts, we share our ideas.
Sure.
And we share it on a platform that's called the Greg James Community Show.
Yeah.
And we make no apologies about that, because why? It's our idea, it's our opinion, and it's our thoughts. When you look at it, do you see the work being hindered when it comes to what's best for the community, what's best for the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that anybody on the other side would even disagree with that. I mean, I think the work all around is being hindered, you know, and I think the only thing that changes on one side or the other is who you blame, right? But at the end of the day, when an environment is toxic,
Wow.
it doesn't matter if you have more votes than the other side, you still have to operate within that environment. And so, you know, for example, it's really hard to have a conversation about how do we attack violent crime. And we talked about this, I think, on the last show. How do we attack violent crime when, you know, there's this kind of gotcha politics that's in place where it's like, okay, every time somebody proposes something, depending on what side they're on, the other side says, oh, well, you're doing this to benefit this group, or you're racist, or you're horrible. And so it becomes, now you can't talk about ideas. And I mean, that's the whole point of having a governing body, is that you would exchange ideas and come to some sort of consensus.
Yeah. Where everyone benefits and it's good for everybody.
Right.
So we're in, I mean, it's elections time, and we're going to be talking more about it. But the incumbent Jack Porter, challenger Rudy Ferguson, young man who's been around for a while. I mean, he's made several attempts at running for office and has been very active in and around our community. So we're going to be talking more about that. And then the former mayor, Dot Inman, is making a political run against Curtis Richardson, our commissioner, who I feel and believe has done an amazing job. And so we'll be talking about that even the more. Also, man, listen, I've got an interview scheduled with the former Leon County Superintendent Jackie Pons on April 17th. I put out a post not too long ago and just was thinking, and here it was. It created such a buzz that the Democrat reached out to him, others reached out to him, and then me and him ended up having a conversation. I said, man, I'd love to do an exclusive with you to just talk about, you know, what's your plans, your ideas. But before I got a chance to do the exclusive, he already made a decision that he's going to run for superintendent of Jefferson County Schools.
Well, now you have more to talk about.
Yeah, I got a little more to talk about. I mean, I thought for sure that, I thought it'd have made for an interesting race.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting. I mean, I think, I'm excited to hear the interview. I'm interested to hear his thoughts around why Jefferson County, why now. I think it's going to be cool to see, you know, how that race plays out over there. I'm not real familiar with Jefferson County politics, but I do know there's probably some folks in the Leon County race that are taking a sigh of relief. I think that race is also going to be very, very interesting to watch. That it's always a very contentious race. I think it's always a very tight race, and so it'll be Leon County Superintendent's race will be one to pay attention to.
And listen, and we're starting early. I mean, it's time now for you to get excited about August. It's time for you to now start doing your research. It's time for you to start asking questions. It's time to get engaged. It's time now to look at those who have been serving, and let's look at how they serve. And let's look at what they do. Let's look at why they do what they do. And I think that's highly important. So we're going to be in an exclusive interview with former Superintendent Jackie Pons right here on April the 17th. I mean, it's going to be happening right here. And we get a chance to talk about, you know, what made him make the decision, Jefferson over Leon. And we'll hear more about that as well. Also, man, listen, it's heating up for State Senate seat District 3.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's,
a lot of buzz was in the air about attorney Daryl Parks. Lot of buzz, a lot of rumors were circulating that he was going to run. He was going to run, but hey, man, it's official, and I just feel and believe that he's well known. Well known. I mean, he has his name recognition is great. He's done a lot of work in the community. He just hadn't started, but he's done a lot of work throughout all of the 13 counties. And so I think it's going to be a very, very competitive race.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's no secret that Leon County leans blue, and so, I think that in some ways, Senator Simon winning 2 years ago was surprising to some people. And I think there were a few dynamics that played in his favor, but the team got out and worked, and it'll be interesting to see now with a contender like Daryl Parks. I mean, I think it's going to be a closer race. I think Senator Simon's got some name recognition now. He's had 2 years to kind of show what he's capable of, and I think one of the interesting pieces of that race is when you look at Leon County. When Senator Simon won, I think it had been something like 30 years since we last had Republican representation. And so just from
but now taking into consideration the redistricting played a little bit into his favor, but it did not weigh heavy because there's still more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been some folks that thought that redistricting kind of did that. I don't know that I agree with that. If you look at the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are there. I mean,
Yeah.
there are more Democrats than Republicans in that district, in the 13 counties. So
Yeah. And if anything, it forces the district to be more moderate, I think, than, if you were a true blue seat. I think there's some seats down in Orange County that lean heavy blue, and you'll probably see more of a farther left leaning candidate there. But I think the interesting thing has been seeing what it looks like in Leon County, having a Republican in that seat versus having a Democrat. I mean, for better or worse, Republicans tend to do a lot better on the budget. I mean, I think last year, Senator Simon brought home around 90-something million. And then this year, I think we're on track to see about 131 million come into the district. And I mean, that's just, if you look back at Senator Osley, she did a good job representing the district, but just again, for better or worse, because of the dynamics of it, I think her last year, she was only able to bring in about 30-something million. And so, it's a big impact.
It's a big impact. And it's sad that we allow the politics to govern how things are done, whether it's ARA or whether it's Steve.
Yeah.
And the people suffer in the process. So I think the race is going to be very competitive. We're going to talk more about it. We're going to get a chance to have both of them on our show to talk about it. I feel like there's a lot of excitement around the fact that Daryl Parks has entered the race. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are looking forward to regaining that seat back, and it's quite possible.
Yeah,
it's quite possible. I think there are two more candidates that have filed, and I don't know for sure, but I think one of them maybe is getting out of the race. I know County Commissioner Neesmith is still in the race, and I mean, it's about being able to generate money.
Yeah.
For 13 counties right now, as I check the records, I think Senator Simon has almost $500,000 in the budget, almost, and I don't think Daryl Parks will have problems raising money as well. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think Parks will probably see some national money come in. He'll certainly have the support of the local Dems. Senator Simon's got a big war chest too, so it's going to be an expensive race. I think if I remember correctly, I think the race 2 years ago was I think it hit $2 million total, or over that, when you count all the media spends and everything that it took to.
So why so much of an investment? I mean, not just on the Senate side of things, but just races in general. Why the big investment for a salary that?
Well, I don't think anybody Maybe they do, but I don't think anybody's running for that seat. Nobody runs for the Florida legislature for the salary. I mean, I think the salary last time I looked was
less than 20 down, maybe a little bit more than 20.
I think it's closer to 29 now, but I mean that doesn't even pay rent these days. So I think, but when you look at the money that comes in, typically it's not, I mean, the candidates aren't spending their own dollars. You're seeing other folks, whether it's people on the ground, whether it's interests like the Florida Medical Association, you know, the plans, you see any group that that can kind of join together. I mean, you'll see money flowing in because they want to support the right candidates. But you know, I think one of the things that when you look at the money that flows in, the reason these races are so expensive in Florida is because our media markets are so expensive. I mean, it's just, Florida is a very expensive state to run ads in. And so a large portion of what goes into that is just the nature of what it costs to get people's eyes in Florida. So,
wow. Well, hey, it's going to be an interesting race, and certainly we're going to be talking more about it. That's Senate seat District 3. That's 13 counties, and it's official. Civil rights attorney Darrell Park has now entered that race, and we're going to be talking more about it as we go further into 2024. Oh man, we've got to get the mayor and our county commissioner, Bill Proctor, together. We got to figure out, how does that happen?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think to kind of back up and put that in context, I mean, these negotiations have just gone, I mean, they've just been off the rails from the beginning. This won't come as a surprise to most people who know me or follow me on Twitter. I mean, I think it's really easy for critics of the process to look at the city commission or look at the city manager and say, well, this is, this is their fault. They're not taking care of our firefighters. And, that's just, it takes two to tango. I mean, when you look at the way that the firefighter negotiations have played out and the way that they started, there's just been this, I'll put it this way. Mm-hmm. If you and I were part of we were trying to make a deal, right? You wanted something, I wanted something, and we were trying to come to terms. If we sat down and you immediately started going around and trying to subvert me, and I mean, before we really even had started negotiating, that probably wouldn't go very well. And so I think when you look at the firefighters negotiations, the union as an entity, not the firefighters, but the union as an entity was weaponized, and it was used in a way to advance a political agenda. And so that's fine, but the problem is that they jumped in and they did that knowing that they were about to enter a negotiation. and so it's there's been folks that are saying, well, this is about political retribution because they endorsed this person over that person. But I mean, I would argue it has nothing to do with political retribution. It's just the overall tone of the negotiation started out that way. And it's just very difficult to get anything done when you have one party that's playing gotcha politics. And at the end of the day, the people that are hurting are the firefighters. They're sitting here while you have an entity that's basically become the story that's supposed to be advocating for them. And so, I think it's been a failure of leadership in some ways, and it's disappointing to see. So.
Wow. Hey, well, listen, let me get ready to pay a bill or two. But listen, this is the Greg James Community Show. And what you're hearing is our views, our opinions, our thoughts. And on this program, we're entitled to give our views, our ideas, and our thoughts. Hey, keep it locked right here. Don't you go nowhere. Greg James Community Show. Hallelujah. 95.3 FM. We'll be right back. Want to say good afternoon to the Capital City Chamber tuned in. Also want to say good afternoon to Commissioner Curtis Richardson. William Hayes, what's going on, brother? Pamela Simmons, how are you? we are keeping you and your family in prayer. Also, want to say good afternoon to, that's right, Stephanie. Good afternoon to you. 850-671-1450. If you got something on your mind, why don't you give us a call? We want to hear from you. 850-671-1450. That is the number to call. So yeah, man. So I think that got a great listening audience, and we're grateful for them. And so I'm trying to get everybody in. Good afternoon, and we are back, and in the studio with me is none other than attorney lobbyist Jared Williams, and he's a co-host of one of the shows that's located right here on Hallelujah 95.3, and certainly he's slowed down enough now to get ready to get started, man. So let's talk a little bit about when you look at certain things that's going on around our city, our county. What do you feel like some of the biggest things that we as a community need to be engaged in?
I mean, I think the affordable housing is something that people throw around a lot, and I'm not convinced that we're looking at it in the right ways. When we talk about affordable housing, it means a lot of different things, right? I mean, I think there's kind of the traditional definition of affordable housing, which is like federal, and subsidized, and then there's affordable housing, which is, for folks that maybe don't reach a certain level of poverty but still struggle to pay the bills, because we all are. And when you look at that kind of workforce housing, what does that look like? And I think Tallahassee has a huge problem with the housing stock. We have a supply problem, and until we solve that, I'm not sure that you'll see housing prices go down. We've seen, I think Blueprint just put some money into affordable housing, and we'll see how that plays out. But I'm not convinced that we are providing the incentives, because I think in a lot of ways, and you and I have talked about
Right,
this,
right.
I think government is government's really bad at doing things, but it's really, really good at creating incentives for the markets to do things. And so I think that when we look at affordable housing, one of the things that we haven't done a really good job of, I mean, we've done a really good job of student housing, and we've done a really good job of we've got suburban housing going in, but I think we need to maybe look at what are the ways that we can capture some incentives that maybe other places have done that encourage, okay, come in and put housing in, but don't rent it out by the room so that it costs so much that a working family can't live with.
Right.
And so I think we need to kind of hit that middle gap, and I think once we do that, we'll start to see affordable housing become more affordable.
Yeah. So when you think about all the building, all the developing that's going on, how do you see that? I mean, one of the things that I'm really happy to know is that there are a lot of opportunities that are now being given to minorities, small business owners, who are now able to connect with some of our developers, some of our general contractors, to have a opportunity to find employment, man. I think that is something that I can applaud that's happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's good. Some folks that know me might be surprised to hear me say I don't think development is the right long-term answer. I mean, if you look at all those projects, eventually they end, right? I mean, and so the idea that you have an injection into the economy, that you create jobs, that's great. People learn skills, and they can then go and do more with that. But at a certain point, some of these developments, those projects wrap up. And so, I think as a community, we need to start seeing, okay, like what are the industries that we're attracting? How do we get more manufacturing here? I mean, how do we get more employers like Amazon coming in and paying decent wages and providing opportunities for education? And so, I think development's good. I see development as kind of a means to an end, right? I mean, I see development as a way for us to solve our housing supply problem. But when you look at the other needs that our community has, we need something more sustainable. Our top employers are all government entities.
And that's it.
Yeah. And so, I think we need to be looking at those things. And I know that, we have some great organizations that are looking at that. I mean, the Office of Economic Vitality is largely responsible for Amazon coming in. So I think the next question is how do we get more employers like that?
And since you mentioned that, let's look at that, because when you talk about Amazon coming in, you got to look at, first of all, they went beyond what they said was going to be the minimum wage, and then the number of people that they were able to employ. I mean, it really did something for the average family, that single mom that's going to work for minimum, and now she's able to find employment, at a company like Amazon. And certainly, like you said, we've got to figure out ways in which we bring more of those kind of opportunities to our city. But hey, listen, if we keep building, there won't be any land.
Yeah, I tend to think part of the issue when you talk about building and land is I think we've got density right now that's probably not where it needs to be. And when I say density, I mean the amount of housing units that you can put on a plot of land. And so, we have a lot of single family zoned neighborhoods that could probably support a higher density. That's for the city planners and folks smarter than me. But I think there's ways to solve the land problem, but I'm not sure Tallahassee's there yet. We've got, there's a huge acres of land that just aren't being used down near the airport. We've got different plots and areas of Tallahassee that we could grow into if we needed to. But I think one of the challenges that we have is could we grow more efficiently by growing upward? And
that's the challenge. Yeah. Listen, we got one of our listeners on social media says you still have those in office governing affordable housing never lived in or visited affordable housing neighborhood. The question is, what are the politicians' definition of affordable, and does it really correlate with the real numbers?
I mean, I can't speak for the politicians. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I know, I think you mentioned that Curtis Richardson is watching. I mean, Commissioner Richardson, he lives on the South Side. I know that he has visited these communities. He spent time in South City. I'm not sure I would agree with that for every politician. I'm sure there are some politicians that have not been there, or that may not be their highest priority. But I think that the more important piece of that is, what is the definition of affordable housing? And it's kind of like what I just talked about. I think you have kind of your HUD housing, which is your government subsidized affordable housing, and that's one thing. But then what's affordable for that kind of middle gap between those that are in the top 1% and those that are below the poverty line? And I think that's where you start to see affordable housing. Not that it doesn't hurt elsewhere, but that's where affordable housing really hurts, is when you have kind of a middle income family that's trying to pay their bills, and they've got kids in soccer, and they've got all these different things that they're paying for, and housing going up hits those folks in some ways the hardest. And so, I think when we talk about affordable housing and defining it, that's been the challenge, is how do you incentivize that, even though there may not be a program in place, and there may not be grants and things like that for that level of housing. But I feel like our leadership is looking at that. I think it's just something that we'll have to stay on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, listen, man. So delighted to have with me one of the co-hosts that's going to be having his own show right here on the Greg James Community Show, and that's attorney Jared Willis, who's going to be sharing once a month ideas, thoughts when it comes to city government policies, procedures, and looking at ways in which we as a community that can become more engaged in some of the policies and the procedures that are taking place in our local city government and even our school boards meetings. Our voice really matters when it comes to meetings like these.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that, I mean, having just come off of the, the charter review committee, I think I got a firsthand view of what those meetings look like. I've been to my fair share of commission meetings. I think what ends up happening at these meetings is that you have kind of your regulars, right? I mean, you have the 10 to 12 people that always show up.
And they always raising Cain.
Yeah, and that's their right. But I think what ends up happening though is that the folks that are busy, right? I mean, they got to put dinner on the table because it's 5 o'clock and they just got off work, or they got to go pick up the kids from school. Those folks, you kind of lose that voice when they don't show up. And I know it's harder for them to show up, which is why they're not there. But I think one of the problems that you have is, for those that are making decisions, they're only ever hearing from one side. And so the voice of the everyday person in some ways gets kind of lost in that. And then you have situations where you have a vote that's done and it's all the same people that always show up, and they said one thing and they're like, well, we speak for the people. And, there's no counter voice. I mean, whether they do or they don't, you don't know, but, they're able to claim that because they're like, well, that's what everyone said that showed up.
Right. And I guess that's why it's so important for all of those who are listening to the broadcast to become more engaged in our local school board meetings, our local city commission meetings, our county meetings, so that you can hear, and not only hear, but then you can be heard. Because as you just said, I mean, when you look at these meetings, it's a football starting lineup, and they're always in the opposition, and they're always stating their name, and they're always banging the podium, and
yeah,
and they'll sound, and it becomes annoying.
Well, and I'll give you another example. I think that the counter side to that is, then you have folks that complain about, well, why did they do this? It's like, well, where were you?
Right.
We had an instance where, there was an item before the charter review committee, and we had a guy that came out later and he said, well, why didn't you guys do this? It's like, well, you weren't here. You didn't say anything. You'd rather yell at us later than take the time and provide your input. And, I think that's going back to the city commission or the school board. I think that the folks that are there, you work with what you have at the time, the information that you have, that staff brings you, and things like that. And so I think that it's really challenging to work in an environment where people would rather throw a dart later because they didn't like what you did than show up and be part of the process. And in some ways it's kind of like that old argument, well, if you didn't vote, then you can't complain about the current environment. And it's similar. You have to have some level of input. And along those lines, I think you talked a little bit about some of the local elections that are coming up. I think people also, they forget that there's an August election. I mean, the turnout in the primary is in
Really?
Tallahassee, it's abysmal.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our elections get decided in the primary. I mean, right now, and I think some of this may change depending on a ballot initiative that's coming up, but right now, if there's only 2 folks in a local election, so whether that's city or county or whatever it may be, it gets decided in the primary. So some voters will never even see that election or have any input on it. The other thing is, if you get past 50%, so in a race where there's 3 or more candidates, if somebody gets more than 50% in the primary, it's over, it's done. And so you have a whole swath of Leon County voters that never get to participate in an election because they didn't show up. And, it's wild to think when you compare that to the number of people that show up in the primary, what a small percentage of our electorate is deciding
who's going to serve.
Yeah.
And then when it's over, you hear all the complaints. So we're going to encourage all of those who are listening to the broadcast, and we're really starting some initiatives now that's going to be working to get people out to vote, working to ensure that people are registered to vote, because this 2024 election, I think, is going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial to the next phase of what our city, what our state, even what our nation looks like. So people got to get out. I mean, this is not an hour for you to say my vote doesn't matter. They're going to do what they want to do anyway. This is not an hour to have that mindset. This is not an hour to even allow people to have you in a conversation saying that, because your vote matters, your voice matters, and this election cycle, you got to be heard. And the only way you're going to be heard is you got to get up and you got to go vote. And that's what I feel like is so important in this election cycle. And we're going to be talking more about it, but certainly I want to thank you for joining me today. And yeah, it was. I mean, we had, as a matter of fact, I got about 5 minutes left. I really want to open up the line for some callers. If someone has something on their heart, on their mind that they want to share, 850-671-1450. That's the number to call. And hey, we are here, and certainly want to make this, we get ready to start this. This is going to be huge. I want you to mark your calendars. June 1st, let me say that again, June 1st, mark your calendar. It's the Tallahassee Leadership Prayer Breakfast. Normally, we would do it in January. Normally, we've been doing it for the last 8 years in January. This January, we didn't get a chance to really make it happen in January. A few things were in the way. But June the 1st, 2024, is the Tallahassee Leadership Prayer Breakfast. And our theme is the gathering of watchmen. That's right. It's going to be a time where we're calling for all of our men to be involved, to be engaged. It's the gathering of the watchmen. That's right. The watchmen, it's time for the watchmen to get on the wall. We've got to save our family, got to save our future, and we got to save our faith. Well, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to the phone lines. Good afternoon, caller. You're on the air.
Young folks that don't have to register in 16, so that you'll be prepared and that you'll read up on candidates and you'll keep on, studying. So at 18, you'll be ready to vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. 16 years old, they can register to vote. Did you know that? I did not know that.
That's cool.
So that means that ought to be a part of the civics class in every school. Did I just say that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that.
I didn't know
that. I mean, I remember going with my mother when I was younger and doing like an early voting, but it didn't count. It was just kind of getting in the habit of doing it. I don't even know if they still have that in it, but I didn't realize you could pre-register.
Yeah, pre-register. That is definitely a man. That's a tool to really work with, because you get kids at 16 to pre-register, you get them engaged in the process, then they become a part of it. They understand it. So, hey, I want to thank the caller for sharing that information. For those of you who got 16-year-olds out there, let's get them to the supervisor of election office. Let's get them pre-registered, and then let them create their own little ballot and let them begin to select and research candidates and let them become engaged in the process. We can't lose this generation. They cannot become silent, because if they become silent, then our city is going to be sorrowful. Our nation is going to be sorrowful. Then it's going to be a sad day in America if we lose this generation. Mark the date. That's June the 1st. It's the Tallahassee Leadership Prayer Breakfast. It's the gathering of the watchmen. That's right. The gathering of the watchmen. It's going to be the first Saturday in the month of June, which is Father's Day month. And man, we're going to be making a major call. Can you imagine 1,000 men and women in the Leon County Civic Center?
Wow.
I mean, you were there last year.
Yeah, last year was huge. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, what were some of your takeaways?
I think, and this goes back to some of the previous points I made, it's cool to see the community come together like that. I think we have so few opportunities to do something like that where you have all the leaders in one room kind of talking and moving with some level of intention around what's best for our community. And so that was really cool to see. I think my biggest takeaway was just how exciting it was to see that we can come together. But it doesn't happen often, but that was great to see.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so it's going to be happening June the 1st, and we definitely want you to make plans to join. Listen, I'm in search of 20 ambassadors that's going to help facilitate how we create this year's Tallahassee Leadership Prayer Breakfast. That's right. I'm going to be searching for 20 ambassadors that's going to help as we generate 1,000, let me say it again, 1,000 men in the room. When I first got out of prison, I used to do this. I always dreamed of this, and I started it at midnight. I used to see it at midnight. You get ready to talk about that so that people can get information. But when I was in prison, the Lord gave me a vision of the word M-A-N, amen. And it was man at night. And I said, when I got out, I was going to do the 1,000 men rally only because Paul and Silas at midnight, they prayed. And I got out of prison in 2008 in the month of March. And in the month of July, we went out at Walker Forward with the 1,000 men rally. And it went on for about 5 years or maybe 6 from different places. And men would come out, families, pastors, leadership, elected officials. And so I just feel and believe that this is a season that we understand that the man is missing, the father is missing, the male is missing. So it's going to be the gathering of the watchmen. And I'm excited about it. I mentioned it to some of our pastors already, mentioned it to Doc D, man, he's already excited about it. We had a conversation about it on yesterday. And Doc, man, I mean, it's been a while and we missed this year, but the excitement is there. So I want you to mark the date, June the 1st. It's the first Saturday in June. It's going to be at Tallahassee Leon County Civic Center. It's the Tallahassee Leadership Prayer Breakfast. It's the gathering of the watchmen. A call to men. Talk about what's happening with this.
Yeah, so we just, thank you, Doc. We have some more information on the pre-registration. So I didn't know any of this. This is cool. So you can pre-register at age 16 to vote. So you just go and fill out your standard voter registration form. You can go in person to the Supervisor of Elections. You can go to the office.
Yes,
you can go to the Division of Elections. You can go to the state agencies. You can go to the library. So, and the way this works is if you are going to be 18 on or before Election Day. So on or before Election Day, your pre-registration is automatically activated 30 days before the election. So especially for 17-year-olds that are going to be 18 by the time they can vote in August or November. This is huge because that means that it's not something you have to go think about. You don't have to time it. You can just go ahead and pre-register. And then on Election Day, for your first election that you can vote in, you're ready to go. So I think what we should do is maybe we'll throw this link in the comments just so everyone has it. But yeah, again, if you're age 16, get out there, pre-register. This is great.
Wow. Listen, certainly want to thank the caller for that information because Bible said people perish for lack of knowledge. And when you get information, you share it, you empower people with it. So I'm looking forward to see what school is going to put up registering the most 16-year-olds. I mean, because you know what I'm saying? I mean, we got all of these public schools, private schools with 16-year-olds. That should be one of the challenges. Should be a civic assignment.
Yeah.
And see what school registers the most. Did I just throw that out there?
Yeah, maybe some enterprising student can get out the vote for their students.
Absolutely. And maybe we create a 16-year-old voting booth at at the schools. Each school create a voting booth for the 16-year-olds who register, and then make them do the research on the candidates, and then send them to the polls to vote. Did I just give them something for free?
I think you just gave them more homework.
Hey, that's how we do it right here on the Greg James Community Show, where we inspire, inform, and we make a difference. Certainly want to thank my good friend, Attorney Jared Willis, for joining us, and give big shouts out to Attorney Mataki Akbar, who is in court, wanted to break away, thought that he could break away, but he didn't make it. But his voice is one that you'll be hearing real soon. Thank you, Christine Henry. We had to go pick up her daughter. And I don't know what happened to Attorney Kirk Bender. He was supposed to call. But however, I want to thank you so much for holding it down. Thank all the good people on social media for tuning in, and for the thousands that listen to us by way of 95.3. Thank you so much. And remember this, Sunday morning was Easter. They didn't expect them to get up, but it got up. I want to tell somebody, they didn't expect you to come out, but you came out. They didn't expect you to get up, but you got up. Now that you're up, walk in a resurrected life. And what's a resurrected life? It's a life that makes a difference. Until next week, I want you to have an amazing weekend and be blessed. And we'll be right back Wednesday. Same station, same time, same conversation. I'm Greg James, and this has been your informative show right here on 95.3. But God bless all of you all. Thank you for tuning in.